Everybody, welcome to Balkan Moto. Today we're going to try to correct something that I found out after riding the bike for a little bit of time that definitely needs correcting. So let's check it out. So the problem that we'll be correcting today is to do with the seat. So the way I had designed it pretty much looks good if no one's sitting on it. And by extension, once you do sit on it, it kind of collapses quite a bit this way. So it creates this like angled surface that you're sitting on. So as you accelerate, you feel like you're gonna slide off the bike. So today what we're going to do is we're going to try to correct that. And the way we're going to do that is essentially we're going to move these mounting points higher. Let's take a look at the parts that I've bought that we're going to use to do that. And here are the parts that we're going to use. So I bought this 1.5 inch square tubing with pre-drilled holes already in it. And I bought another set of bolts with nuts and washers for them. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut off essentially square pieces, or actually they're not exactly square because these holes are, if you cut it like this, that's not exactly a square, but essentially that's what we're going to cut off. And then we're going to use these little blocks as the spacer that's going to sit under the spring. So that's going to go kind of up there, and then the spring will go on top of it, essentially elevating the entire system on the backside by 1.5 inches. So first let's measure out some more precise pieces that we're going to cut. Cut them off and then let's test fit it. Okay, so this is the piece that we need. Essentially it's a 26.5 millimeter piece, or just about 1 inch, or just over 1 inch wide. So we're going to cut that off, and then that should fit right under the spring. So let's cut one off, and then we're going to use that cut to then measure another one, and have two pieces. Actually, I might need to cut the second one off the other side, just because when I cut it here, this is going to eat up from this piece. And I need it to be a nice even space on both sides. So let's cut that off and go from there. All right, and this is the piece that we cut off. So this will essentially replace the spacer or the nut that the spring was on, and that will be moved up to the top part of it, and this would fit essentially in its place. So kind of like so, except that would be fully flush with that, and this pin would be on top of it, on the top side. So height wise, we're looking at yay high of a difference. So it's significantly higher, which would also help with the rear fender bumping into the seat. But you can kind of see how that's already even slightly this way, so that when I sit on it, it'll be far more leveled. Okay, so let's cut another piece out, and then we're gonna do a test fit with the extra bolts. So these are the pieces that I have. Now, a few complications. The holes that I drilled where the springs sit, both in the electronics pan that's under the seat, as well as the frame, are meant to fit these bolts. And the new bolts I got are thicker. So if I want to put these guys on the bottom, I need to widen those holes. The other thing is that if I wanted to just temporarily reverse things, then if I put these on top, the rubber things for the springs don't fit on these, and I don't think they make ones that fit on these bolts. So What I'll probably end up doing in the long term is I will have to drill out the holes to make them bigger. But also see if I can get shorter bolts, because these were picked out to fit through the frame and the spacer. So this big gap here is actually way too big for this space. So in order to just test fit things first, we're going to mount it with these on the bottom so that we can attach it to the frame, and we're going to use these on top without the rubber and the leather washers, just so we can test fit and see how high we're actually sitting. So let's put all that together and put it on the bike and see how that goes. Okay, so this is the test fit, and it certainly doesn't look bad. Actually, mounting it this way, having these in here actually fills in the gaps nicely. But I do want to have the rubber against the spring on top instead. So I will have to drill out those things at the bottom. And when I do mount it that way, well, this is actually going to look like it's levitating because this gap will be open. But let's take a look at how that feels to sit on, and maybe push the bike around a bit just to see how that feels. Oh yeah, that's much better. That feels like I'm on the bike now. Sliding off of it as I were before. And the seat is much more comfortable this way. So that works. All right, so that works. Let's take everything off. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna put a coat of paint on these brackets so that they're match the rest of the blacked out look. No, we're not gonna spray the bolts. Bolts will remain the way they are. And we need to do a trip to the hardware store to grab better bolts for the bottom and drill out the holes to make them bigger. All right, so these were kind of what I had previously on the bike. Now what I'm gonna do instead is I'm gonna use these thicker bolts to kind of hold the brackets into the frame. And then I got these smaller bolts that will go kind of in reverse on the top with the new rubber pieces on top. And what I've decided, since these thicker bolts don't fit in the holes for these ones, what I'm gonna do is actually gonna thread those holes with this. This is a 8mm by 1.25 tap that matches these bolts, and kind of I already did one of them, so this is kind of what it will end up being like. And just screw this all the way down. I'll put the nut on the bottom end just to kind of make sure it's secured and it's not going anywhere. But now I have essentially a thread in the frame as well, so that's not going anywhere. So let's do the other hole as well and then assemble. Okay, and here's the final result. So we have the brackets firmly held in place. I used the rubber gaskets that I bought between the pan and the bracket, and I left the leather ones for the top where the spring will be, just to make sure to reduce any clanking and metal on metal action. So now let's put the seat back on, see how that fits on these, and maybe take it for a quick ride. Okay, and here's the final result. The bike retains its silhouette, but the seat is much higher. Now there's like this big gap in between. However, it's much more comfortable now. And I think that gives me plenty of clearance between this and this as this comes up. Because before there were cases in which if I went through a big enough pothole, it ended up bottoming out. So because this was leather, it actually didn't damage the fender much. But now it's actually good. And yeah, so bike is still good. So let's go take it out for a test ride. All right guys, we fixed the seat. The bike is much better now. It's actually comfortable to ride on. You don't feel like you're gonna slide off, or your hip flexors don't end up flexing the entire way. So after about 40 minutes, you're in pain. So much better. Make sure to subscribe, hit the little bell for notifications when new videos become available. Check me out on Instagram at Balkan 2018 and make sure to check out balkanmo.com. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.